When you told someone about a serious struggle, what response screamed, "This person has never faced a real problem"? I started a job about 2 months ago. My dad is 60 and was in the hospital dying, and I didn't make it home, because I felt like until he was on his deathbed I'd just go on weekends. My current boss told me the day of his funeral, "We will be happy to let you make up the days you miss for his death." After returning to work, she hasn't said a word to me, and was upset I used my bereavement days. Currently looking for new employment. When my mom committed suicide over the summer in high school, I came back and a girl said she understood because she had totaled her car that summer. You can't pay for it? Just ask your parents. Hahaha, oh honey. I wish. When I was in college and depressed, I spoke about it to some people at a hangout. My ex's friend told me just travel, it makes me feel better every time. This year I went to Spain and Egypt. Yeah, let's just ignore the fact I had no money for therapy, and I should have used that non-existent money to travel, and twice in 1 year. I live in a nice area, but my wife and I are average income folks without family money. At the bus stop with my kids, another parent asked if they could borrow our housekeeper. We don't have one, because hers was sick with COVID and the dishes/laundry were starting to stack up. She was in full crisis mode. You don't have money? Just go to an ATM. I know you were close, but aren't you glad you don't have to deal with all that drama anymore? My sister died this July. That was the response of someone who is now an ex-friend. Editing to add that this friend had never even met my sister, has zero empathy for mental health or addiction, and truly believes we are better off without my sister. As someone with lifelong chronic illness, I missed just 2 days from work and my boss had a talk with me and said I get sick and I still come to work. In the real world you have to push through it. I was slowly dying from complications of a now treated disease, and she knew that. The audacity. My ex called me crying on Christmas because she asked for an Apple TV, and her parents didn't get her the newest version. I've had a lot of odd jobs over the years, especially in my late teens/early 20s. Most just different kinds of minimum wage stuff. 1 year, when I was on summer break from college, I was back home working 3 different jobs. I went on a few dates with a guy who had a trust fund and his parents' black Amex card. One day we're at lunch together and I was telling him about the absolute random grab bag that was my employment history. Once I finished, he looked at me confused and said, "Do you just really like working?" There was not another date after that. Anyone who says, "But she's your mother," when you talk about going no contact. I'm glad you can't even comprehend needing to cut off an abusive parent for your own well-being, but maybe shut up if you don't know what it's like. My friend's mother started working as a secretary at Comcast in the 80s by walking in and asking if any positions were available. She eventually became good friends with one of the founder's sons, and got access to a bunch of stock benefits and bonuses, effectively making her a multimillionaire. When I was finishing college, I was applying for jobs, and not getting any calls back, and got told by her young people don't apply themselves enough. You need to show up early and ask for the job. I wanted to say, not everyone had a chance to sleep with a rich CEO's son, but held back. My fiancé has had bad anxiety when we first met, and one of our mutual friends said, "Just don't be anxious," when the topic came up. My son was born after 8 years of infertility, but I had him at a slightly more inconvenient time of year. I was talking about this, and some woman said, "You should have planned better." My friend's aunt is rich, and I had to sit and hear her complain to her family about how inflation is so bad she had to buy a BMW X3 instead of an X5 like she originally planned. Not a single person in the room felt bad for her. Edit, I'm seeing a lot of comments saying that if she's downgrading, she's not rich. I know a handful of rich folks, and they stay rich by setting a budget and sticking to it. I'm 100% sure that if she really wanted to, she could have spent the extra scratch. But it was clear at the time that other unavoidable expenses had cut into her car budget. This wasn't said in direct response to it, but my former friend said the following, knowing full well that I was suffering from depression. Depressed people should just get over it. I had depression, and that's what I did. He was either lying about having depression in the first place or lying about getting over it. Both are equally plausible. My wife was friends with a trust funder whose grandfather was super wealthy and even started a famous museum you may have heard of. Anyway, my wife was taking part in a community garage sale at the apartment where she was living then, when her friend asked if she could bring over some stuff she never used and wanted to get rid of. One was a very cheap, small screwdriver set, like this. Anyway, some guy asked the friend what she wanted for it, and she says, $0? Guy huffed and walked off. She says to my wife, what do I know? I never use tools. I was standing next to my mom at my sister's funeral, and I overheard someone telling my mom, oh, I know what you're going through, I just had to put my 14-year-old dog down. Both my mom and I were too stunned and upset to say anything. Later that same funeral, the priest talked about how all kids need their parents to hold their hands while crossing the street and how that's literal when they're younger but metaphorical when they're older. My sister was struck by a drunk driver while crossing the street to get back to her apartment. The light was red, so she had the right of way and was using the crosswalk, and later had to be taken off of life support because her injuries were too bad. It's been 6 years since her funeral, and I still get upset thinking about both things. Well, you obviously aren't trying hard enough if you can't get a minimum wage job after a week of handing out resumes for 4 hours every day. My stepmonster, I'd never had a job before, so my resume was just a bunch of volunteer work and my WIP degree. I also wasn't allowed to apply online to anything, even though that's the #1 response I got when I walked into places. She made me hand out resumes for 8 hours a day every day after that little conversation. I got essayed by a woman, one of friends I tried to talk to, asked if I got her number after since she wanted me so bad. But you have a good job and have a chance of a house? How can you be struggling? The response I got from a colleague when they found I was in therapy and seeking an autism test. This falls more under the narcissistic category, but at the time I had a cat who we recently had to put down due to heart failure. I asked an ex to send me the pictures she had of him, and since they meant a lot to me. The response I got was, they mean a lot to me too, and didn't receive them until 4 months later, I'm disabled and have been struggling financially while waiting to get approved on disability. Had a friend tell me how smart and articulate I am, and she hates to see me wasted on disability. When I told a male friend about how I got catcalled by grown men at 15, right after it happened, and how it affected me, and he went, just enjoy it, and then proceeded to make fun of the situation. These men were like 50, I was 15. 2008, I was in high school and finally broke down to my parents how bad my depression and anxiety was getting. Neither one of them were very comforting. I supposed they didn't really know what to say or do. But my dad basically had no reaction until my mom asked if he had anything to say, and he just said, yeah, everyone is depressed. We're in a depressed economy. He and I have had our issues, but have been able to find common ground now that I'm an adult, but I still refuse to ever open up to him again because he is the most emotionally immature person I know.